Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Hey, 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 hey. The intro is kind of long. This is his second text that was used for the January 2025 people. And I have to say, when I saw this the first time, I said, wow, CSEC really, really did go there. That is how I would approach question 1A of this paper. The purpose of question 1B is for you to understand that every single type of text is appropriate at achieving a specific goal or outcome. My name is Ray and I teach English. In this video, you are going to learn the context behind paper 3, what is expected of you based on what the syllabus says, and we're also going to explore the January 2025 paper 3 exam. Let's go. Paper 3 is designed for people who are writing January exams. Specifically, everybody who's writing Jan exams has to write paper 3. And if you are a private candidate and you are writing exams in May, June, you are also required to write paper 3. Because it's a 2 hour long examination, you need to make sure that you look out for the date for the paper 3 exam as a separate date from the paper 1 and paper 2 exams. The exam is 45 marks in total and it is worth 21% of your grade. By the way, all of these are resources and materials that I use for my private candidates class. So if you are a private candidate, shout out to you. If just saw that it's important to teach this before, at least give like a mini lesson of it before we get into answering the questions. Because once you know what is expected of you from the perspective of the syllabus, it makes it easier for you to prepare for how to answer the questions. So, like I said before, or maybe I did not say, paper 3 is compulsory for all private candidates and for all students writing JAN exams. And so, without further ado, here we go. This is an exam where you are going to be given 3 different texts, and all 3 texts are based on the same issue. So the exam is always going to be based on an excerpt from a recent newspaper article or online magazine. The second text is going to be a cartoon strip or the lyrics to a song. And the third text is going to be a poem, short story, or speech. Now, everything I'm saying here applies to people who are writing both exams in 2026 and January 2027. If you are a May, June 2027 student, you need to check back because the syllabus has changed. I don't know if you know, but if you are in Form 4 going into Form 5 in 2026, there are a different set of rules that are going to apply to you, and I'm going to have to cover that in another video. So in paper 3, what they do is they examine a variety of topics in every single exam sitting. So 1 year, they explore traditional education versus online education. In another year, they explored homelessness. Another year explored obesity, pollution, as the case may be. In the case of the January 2025 paper, they explored internet addiction. And if you have the May, June 2025 paper, this is me specifically asking you to send that paper to me because I've been hunting it down. And for some strange reason, I cannot put my hand on it. So you will be asked to answer 3 questions in this exam. All of your answers, especially for questions 1 and 2, all of your answers are going to be short answer style responses. This is not a multiple choice exam, neither is it an essay exam. For question 1, which is a 3-part question, you are going to be asked about 3 things: main ideas, modes of communication, and language techniques. For question 2, which is also a 3-part question, you're going to be asked about the differences and nuances, specific details with respect to oral presentations. And for question 3, you're going to be asked to write your unique presentation based on the same topic that is being analyzed in the year in which you are sitting the exam. That is, you're going to be asked to write either a poem, a short story, a dramatic skit, or an article. So, like I said before, where they explored homelessness, obesity, pollution, for question 3, you're going to be expected to write a poem on homelessness, or write a short story about pollution, or write a dramatic skit about obesity, or whatever topic is relevant to the year in which you are writing the examination. Now, let's get into the 3 texts that students were asked in January 2025. Text 1, I'm going to be reading the text If you have the paper, if you're studying this exam, I would suggest that you read along with me. Text one, the title of the article is Have We Become Slaves to the Internet? While I read this using the internet. In just over 2 decades, the internet has become a new drug and a means of domination exploited by neoliberal giants such as Google, Facebook, or Netflix, as well as a growing number of countries. Today, after more than 2 decades of using the internet, we must ask ourselves a fundamental question. Does the internet serve to liberate us or transform us into consenting slaves? Has this tool of liberation turned into a tool of domination? Adam Alter, professor of marketing at New York University, tells us that the internet is a new kind of drug that, although immaterial and virtual, has equally harmful consequences. More than half of the population of the developed world is addicted to their smartphone, email, video games, Facebook, Instagram, or Netflix. The conglomerates that own these products develop sophisticated strategies aimed at exploiting flaws in the human psyche with the aim of making them literally irresistible. They create what psychologists call a behavioral addiction. Thus, the drug addict can no longer do without the internet and its associated products. The effects can be disastrous: isolation, depression, unhappiness, or financial ruin for those addicted to online gaming. The word drug may seem excessive, but it is the right word. You only need to surf social media for a few hours to realize that these sites are driving us crazy. It brings out some of the worst traits of humanity, such as voyeurism and exhibitionism, creating a circus of shameless egos off a never ending quest to satisfy their lust for phony admiration. Social media explores the paradox of those who create a certain beautiful image of themselves for the outside world, all the while masking their despair and loneliness. These images, which are created, provoke admiration and envy from others, are, in a sense, contemporary gods. They encourage narcissism and a feeling of triumph arising from someone else's compelling gaze. This drug certainly doesn't kill anyone, at least not directly. In fact, it can even be considered harmless. However, it is important to study the effect of this drug on minds manipulated by desire. How to elicit desire in a person is something that corporations like Google, Facebook, and Netflix study and learn how to manipulate. People who spend most of their time in a virtual ecosystem surrender their imagination, our most intimate and powerful tool, to machines. They give these conglomerates the keys to their soul, and in turn, these companies use this precious information to make money. Unlocking this desire is a necessary step in turning an individual into a consumer and an eager foot soldier of capitalism. We should ask ourselves whether we are really free to make our own choices. Who decides how we relate to the world as we try to manage and tame it? It's clear that this colonization of our imagination and bodies is at the very heart of the neoliberal economic project. This is adapted from an article by Umar Timol, which was published on 21st December 2020 and published under the title Have We Become Slaves to the Internet? This is his second text that was used for the January 2025 paper. And I have to say, when I saw this the first time, I said, wow, CSEC really, really did go there. Because if the title of the newspaper article was, Are We Slaves to the Internet? This cartoon captures that concept very well. And this is exactly the image that they went with. If you look very closely at it, it doesn't take long to realize that this is a person who is Afro descended. This person is very dark in complexion. They have kinky, coily hair. And what we observe, they are holding a mobile device, which I would assume is a phone. There's a shackle around their neck. But if you look very, very closely, there are some links in that chain which is connected to the device, and every single link in the chain is representing an icon for a social media platform. So if I look very closely there, I can see Instagram, I can see WhatsApp, I can see Facebook, I can see Twitter, I think I see a YouTube play button and a little a Snapchat and a Twitter bird at the end. So, what I also observe is that there seem to be some really dark circles around this person's eyes, and I am pretty certain that that is not by chance. The third text that was used for CSEC 2025 January paper 3 is this text called Everyday Robots. And I thought it was a poem, and then I realized that they titled it a song, and I found that that was really interesting. And so I went looking for the song. Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, hey, hey, hey. But the lyrics say, we are everyday robots on our phones. I can't. No, I just can't. I'm sorry. We are everyday robots on our phones in the process of getting home, looking like standing stones out there on our own. We're everyday robots in control or in the process of being sold, driving in adjacent cars till you press restart. Everyday robots just touch thumbs, swimming in lingo they become, stricken in a status C, one more vacancy. For everyday robots getting old, when our lips are cold, looking like standing stones out there on our own. Little robots in ring-back tones in the process of getting home. Everyday Robots by Damon Albarn. There you go. So these are the questions and these are my answers. I took my time to make sure that I explained to you how I arrived at every single answer. I promise you, I will do another video to deal with question 2. So let's look at question 1. So question 1A is always going to be something along the lines of outline the main idea or issue presented in each of the 3 texts. That means that for 6 marks, you must give them 2 marks worth of information for the idea or the issue presented in each of the 3 texts. Now, the first thing I want you to remember is that a main idea must be expressed as a sentence. A main idea is not a topic. Therefore, to say internet addiction is not a main idea, that's a topic. The main idea is, what does the author of the specific text want you to know their opinion is on the topic of internet addiction. So you have to match topic plus what the author wants to say in order to get main idea, and it must be expressed as a sentence. So some of the things that I observed when I was reading the article, the newspaper article, is that it was designed to inform. It was not designed to entertain or to persuade me. They were not trying to make me laugh, smile, skin, grin, kiki, ha ha ha. They were not also trying to get me to do anything. So this was not it was not an entertainment piece. It was not a persuasive piece. It was an informative piece. The next thing I noticed is that the newspaper article raised the question of whether or not the internet is a solution to humanity's problems or does it create more problems. I also note that the author took the time to make us understand that the way that we are addicted to social media is not just a matter of coincidence, that it is definitely a result of someone's strategic planning and implementation of research data that they have gathered. So, therefore, my answer to the question is the issue of the article, as in the newspaper article, is to explain the problem of internet addiction is the newest drug of addictive behavior, which has the impact of undermining our humanity, creativity, and autonomy. The purpose of the newspaper article is to explore how the internet and how internet addiction is affecting our daily lives, even if it may not be a drug like other drugs which kill people in a lethal way. It does affect humanity. Text 2. So, text 2, as you remember, was not a newspaper article, it wasn't a poem, it was a cartoon. But text 2 also communicates, because one of the things that we learn when we are preparing for paper 3 in private candidates class is we learn that even graphics can communicate. So, text 2 was designed to entertain. It was designed to be thought provoking. It was designed to make someone stop and look not just at the first glance, But to look a little more closely, there was quite a lot of detail in text two, the cartoon, if you remember. So we have here the shackle, the use of the phone, the complexion of this person's skin. This person also seems to be quite young. This does not seem like it's an old man or an old woman. And of course, this person seems to be Afro descended as well. And I'm pretty certain that that was intentional. So text two, like I said, was designed to entertain. There are social media icons in each of the links on the chain around his neck, and he's using a mobile phone. As I've said before, the person's dark in complexion. I think the issue or the main idea of text two is to demonstrate how the new enslaver is social media and the new enslaved is the social media user. Remember, if we think about text two in the context of the newspaper or the magazine article that I just read, that article was focused on, are we now slaves to the internet? So maybe what's happening is that text two is giving us a visual representation of what was mentioned in text one, where we are now enslaved again by a new master. Text 3, also designed to entertain, not designed to inform, not designed to persuade, designed to be thought provoking. The use of the pronoun we means that the speaker was included as one of the robots. That's one of the things I noticed. I also noticed that the song lyrics describe the robotic and automatic ways in which we use our phones. We reach for our phones first thing in the morning and most of the time last thing at night. Sad to say. The issue, therefore, or the idea of text 3 is that the lyrics depict how humans have become robotic and automatic in our phone use. That is how I would approach question 1A of this paper. Now, question 1B. Question 1B asks us to choose one of the three texts and assess the appropriateness of the text that you've chosen for the purpose of communicating the idea or issue. Now, whenever I teach this, I always like to talk about tools. Hear me out. Tools are effective because the tool's purpose is the best way in which that tool can be used. If I want to get some nails into a wall, I would not use the measuring tape to do that. Can I do it using some muscle and the measuring tape? Probably. Can I use the drill, the base of the drill, and pound the nail into the wall? Again, maybe I can. But if I have to choose a specific tool to get a specific job done, I'm going to use the hammer. If I want to take measurements, can I take my measurements by lining up a couple of nails and saying, well, it's 15 nails long or it's 25 nails long? Yeah, I can if I have no other way of measuring. But if there's a measuring tape around, why would I do that? The purpose of question 1B is for you to understand that every single type of text is appropriate at achieving a specific goal or outcome. When writers choose a specific type of text, it's because they want their message to be packaged in a particular way. And that packaging is important. This is why I said it's important to know the newspaper article is going to be the first text in the exam. Because one of the things that we know about newspaper articles is that newspapers are designed for current affairs issues. Newspapers are designed for presenting us with information in language that is not coded or that is not technical, that is not so far above the average and ordinary person, the average person who lives and who may purchase a newspaper. Newspapers are also widely available online and in print for small sums of money, sometimes free. So, why would a newspaper be effective for addressing this specific topic or issue? Well, because newspapers discuss current affairs. They are widely available to thousands and millions online, both in print and in soft copy versions. They are written in clear language, which is free from jargon. The irony is that this article, which is talking about online addiction, is written online. Boom. So that is how I would answer question 1B. I would choose the newspaper. I recommend to my private candidates all the time, always have under your belt, if you remember nothing else, always remember the reasons for which newspapers are effective. Newspapers are highly effective. This is why, in as much as the internet has dominated communications, newspapers are still around and they still have their place. And their place is a very, very solid one. So now let's go to question 1C. For any two of the texts, choose one technique used in each and explain its effectiveness. So you're going to choose two. And once again, you can choose the newspaper and another, or you can choose the other two texts. It's entirely up to you. There's nothing preventing you from using the newspaper again. I've decided that I'm going to answer this question and I'm going to show you how to use all three. So the question is going to ask you to give them the title of the text, the technique used, the effectiveness. There's going to be space on the exam paper for you to write those things, okay? So you're going to write the title of the text. The title of the newspaper article was, Have We Become Slaves to the Internet? The technique that I am relying on is expert opinion. Now, when you are answering this question, the technique that they're talking about is the specific language communication technique, as in what aspect of communication is being used here to convey the writer's idea to you, the reader. Now, that means that you have to do some selection. You should use the one that has more text, obviously. So that is why the newspaper is great. The comic strip might not be, or the cartoon might not be as effective, but the poem will also. One of the techniques that's used in the newspaper article is expert opinion. There were several other techniques used, but I found that this one stood out to me because after the author made his claim that the internet is addictive, we needed some proof, we needed some support for that because that is quite an extensive claim to make. And how does he support his claim? He supports his claim by referring to expert evidence. By referring to Adam Alter, the professor of marketing at New York University, the writer achieves credibility or objective support, as in a neutral party, to support his claim that the internet is addictive. So, when we study this in class, we look at the variety of different language techniques, figurative language techniques such as simile, metaphor, personification, onomatopoeia, alliteration. We even have rhyme. We even have different things like paradox, etc., repetition. As I say repetition, that brings me to the poem. So the second text that you can use to answer question 1C is you can use the repetition of the words everyday robots in the poem. The repetition of the words everyday robots draws attention and emphasizes the issue of addiction to our phones and social media platforms. One of the things that we notice in this poem is that those words, everyday robots, were repeated in every single stanza, with the exception of the final stanza. Repetition achieves emphasis. Whenever something is repeated constantly, it is difficult, if not impossible, to ignore. So that is why it is effective in this poem, because it makes the reader stop. It forces the reader to stop and observe that the songwriter is very concerned about the fact that we have become robotic, that many of our actions are now automatic, and that we are not really being mindful and present in our day-to-day interactions. So the last thing that I explored was the cartoon. Now, as I've said before, I wouldn't recommend using this specific cartoon to answer question 1C, for the simple reason that there isn't much language in the cartoon. Now, that does not mean that there is no language in the cartoon. And the skillful student would be able to say, hey, you know, there are graphic icons, and those graphic icons do communicate. So, this is one way that you can approach answering question 1C for the cartoon. So, the technique used was a combination of the graphic icons forming links in a chain attached to the drawing of a neck shackle connected to the phone. You have to be very, very, very explicit if you're going to use the cartoon to answer this question, okay? Now, how is that effective for the reader? It is effective because the cartoon depicts the burden that the phone represents. It helps the reader to visualize the impact of device addiction on young people, especially. So, there you have it. That is how I would answer questions 1A, 1B, and 1C for the January 2025 paper 3, which was focused on internet addiction. In the very next video, we're going to focus on question 2 and question 3. My name is Ray and I teach English. I'll see you in the next video.